Welcome back to Slightly Tofu. This is Q. In this episode, I'm joined by Laura from Ireland's National Animal Rights Association, NARA. We started with what animal advocacy and veganism look like on the ground in Ireland. Then we dig into the real work, how an undercover video helped push Ireland to ban fur farming, and how NARA is now taking on the pig industry with a backdoor ban strategy that aims to make factory farming economically unviable. We also talked about how to build a non-hierarchical team with strong anti-oppression principles, and how to keep going without burning out. Hi Laura, it's so great to have you with us today. And to start off on a slightly lighter tone, a lighter note before we dive into the heavier stuff, because animal rights can also get very intense. The conversation can get very intense sometimes. So let's talk about Ireland. For a lot of us who haven't visited Ireland or just have no idea about the vegan scene or animal rights movement in Ireland, maybe we can start by just having an overview about animal rights in your country. My go-to question for this overview is always, if we imagine a scale from 0 to 10, where 10 is a full-on vegan utopia and 0 is like a place where there's nothing happening for animal rights, where would you place Ireland today?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I would say I'd place it at maybe about a 4, because in the last maybe 10 years especially, we've seen significant advancements here. Like personally, I've been a vegan since I was 13, and when I went vegan, no one knew what a vegan was or what the word was or how to pronounce the word even. But now anywhere I go in Ireland, there's vegan options available. Dublin especially is incredible for vegan options. We've had political and legislative advancements in the country, such as banning wild animals in circuses, banning fur farming, and other little legislative steps to improve the situation here. So it's had a significant jump, but are we anywhere near a vegan utopia? Unfortunately, definitely not. Not yet.
Right, but at least it grew from 0 to 4 in maybe 0 to 4, right? Maybe 1 to 4.
Yes,
in
a short,
so.
yes, yeah.
This is actually making me a bit more curious about your education, especially you mentioned you started very early on. When you were very young, have you found any classmates or schoolmates who are also interested in animal rights, or did you feel kind of being the only vegan that you're aware of?
Well, I was actually homeschooled, so I didn't go to public regular school, but any of the friends that I had at the time were not vegan and didn't really understand, didn't really get it. And I only, I suppose, found my community when I started joining activist groups like animal rights groups or welfare groups or human rights groups. They were then my people who got me.
As far as you know, right now in terms of education, how is animal rights being educated, or maybe even broader, like compassion education? How are they received by the students, by their parents? Because I think you mentioned in one of your interviews that parents at the beginning, they might be a bit uncertain about this topic, or they might feel a bit sensitive about this topic. What have changed since then?
Absolutely. I mean, initially, even at protests, say fur shops, people would be shielding their children's eyes from the posters. When we'd be invited to go in to give maybe school talks, for example, it would have to be very tame. But now animal rights is more broadly on the national curriculum, welfare of animals, and even, better education in general on progressive issues, on human rights issues. But it's been a jump in the last 10 years, to be honest. We would get emails from students around the world, around Ireland, doing projects in their classroom on a particular animal rights issue. And it would be something that was mandatorily brought up in the classroom, that they had to do a project and pick an animal issue. And back maybe 15, 20 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case at all. And even like we would occasionally get emails from students from other countries who are doing a project on animal issues in different countries, and they might ask us a few questions. So this is a common thread that has come up, which wasn't there before. And it's interesting that that is obviously imposed on the curriculum to try and expand young people's minds on empathy for animals, which is great. So it means that we're already maybe a step ahead than we were a long time ago, you know?
Do you recall when did it start to happen, like the mandatory or it's imposed on the school to have these on the curriculum?
I would say within the last 10 years, we were starting to get an influx of emails from students wanting to interview us or ask us questions or provide information for a class project. And before that, we would be the ones reaching out to schools wanting to give talks. So I don't know exactly what changed. I think maybe it coincided with an update on the Animal Health and Welfare Act. It was updated, I think, roughly around that time frame, and there was more stricter penalties involved for anyone who mistreated an animal. There was better improvements made for animals and more better protections. And I think there's a possible sync with the education system there, but that's just a guess on my part.
This is super interesting because I feel like it's only when I became vegan that I started to realize how anthropocentrism is so ingrained in our education, in our heads. Whenever I go read a sociology book or like philosophy book, they will always have this sentence, humans are very different from animals because we have language or we have rationality, etc. Do you think like in Ireland, it's being changed in terms of how animals is being understood, kind of challenging the anthropocentrism that human is at the very top of the food chain, or, you know, humans are supposed to manage animals, etc.?
I think so, definitely. And I think it also ties in with social media a little bit. There's a couple of rescue groups in Ireland, My Lovely Pig Rescue, My Lovely Horse Rescue, and they're very popular over here. They have tens of thousands of followers on social media, and they're always posting videos about the animals they rescue and the connections that they have with the animals. And they get a massive following, and they get a lot of support around the country. And I think if it wasn't for a social media aspect in this, a lot of people wouldn't be seeing it, wouldn't be making the connection, wouldn't be wanting to help, and wouldn't have empathy. So I think visual aids for people help progress them. And for My Lovely Horse Rescue and My Lovely Pig Rescue, it seems to me a winning combination of what they do and what they put out, which is great. And I think at this point, I don't think there'd be anyone in the country who has not heard of them, you know?
So now let's pivot to your organization. And you have mentioned you have started being in the animal rights movement, very active in the animal rights activism for over 20 years now. So I imagine maybe at the beginning of your activism, there might be a moment or a series of moments when you just feel like, okay, I'm really going to start something of my own, instead of working with existing organizations, even if it just start with a handful of people. I don't know how you recruit more members in your organization. Yeah, was there like a particular turning point that led you to create your own path?
I think like when I joined other organizations, they already had a base and a foundation of who they were, what they wanted to achieve, and how they were going to go about it. And so when I joined initially, I just did whatever it was in the format that they did. But as I experienced other types of activism, particularly from the UK, I realized that I suppose I had a different point of view on how things should be done in terms of being more effective and having more reach. And the organizations that I were in didn't exactly align with that. And I suppose the more I was learning about activism, the more I was intertwining human rights issues as well. So it wasn't a case of like, you know, as long as someone cares about animals, they're welcome to join. You know, I need those background checks of where you stand on, you know, racism and sexism and whatever. But for me, it just meant the need to start from the beginning and create a space that I knew, right, okay, anyone who's with me on this, we're thinking the same way, feeling the same way, we have the same output goals, and we have that moral baseline. And I think sometimes it's important that if you join an organization and it doesn't quite fit, don't just give up and say, okay, this doesn't work for me. Start your own and proceed the way you want to see the world change.
Say, for example, at the beginning, did you already have a full-time job, or did you already decide I'm going to dedicate my career on animal advocacy? When you realized you have your own sets of skills or expertise, and how did you think about to align your expertise with the kind of activism style or ideology that felt most natural to you?
Well, when I started getting involved in activism, I was 14, and then I set up NARA when I was 18. And I actually have a day job. I've always worked. I've had a day job. So all the activism I do is on a voluntary basis. But like for me, I feel like my skill set is organization and consistency. So I'm not good at graphic design. I cannot make websites. I'm not the best at social media either. But I'm very good.
What about comedy?
Not either. But I'm good at planning and good at setting like a target and trying to achieve that target and follow that goal. And I don't care how long it takes to achieve the goal. I'm happy having that protest every week or lobbying that politician every week or whatever the case may be. That's my area of expertise. And I suppose I'd be better with maybe debates or radio and things. So that was my skill set. And then as our group grew, other people came on board to fill my downfalls, basically. So there's other people in the group that are much better at writing, much better at putting documentation together, much better at social media, much better at graphic design, websites. So between us all, we complete the full circle of what's needed to proceed, and we very much balance each other out and support each other, and complement each other with things. So I feel like whatever your skill set is, just start and the right people will come to you and the perfect team will happen before you know it.
Speaking about the right people and the perfect team, and just to think about the people that you worked with back then, did you ever encounter people who are not fully aligned with NARA's philosophy but still want to join you? For someone who hasn't really go fully vegan yet, they still want to support animal rights, or someone who's trying but still struggling and then feel like they can never actually be vegan, or even meat eaters who want to contribute their efforts in other ways. How did you navigate these kind of situations and tensions? Would you still work with them? And how did you approach working with these people whose personal practices weren't like 100% in line with the organization's ideals?
I suppose in terms of like outside supporters, we would get donations, and I don't know who these people are, and they're not necessarily vegan, I would assume. They might like one particular campaign we have and donate €20 or something like that. But in terms of like the core team who would be the ones out leafleting or protesting, over the years, yes, some have joined that maybe were not quite vegan yet, or they were still eating meat, or they were vegetarian, but they knew that as a group our ethos was veganism. So they like over the course of getting to know us for a few weeks would maybe ask us questions or look for help or look for guides, whether it's like where to shop, what to eat. And everyone that I can think of that stayed on board transitioned and became vegan, but it was through our like support and welcoming them still, because we could see that they wanted to help and wanted to do better, and they just needed community in order to do that, But outside of that, I suppose working with other organizations, like human rights organizations or left-wing political groups, they would not be vegan, but they're not, I suppose, members of our group, and they're not in the team, but we might have a common baseline or an overlap. And I can say, put certain things aside to work on a common goal. Like if we were supporting a human rights issue, right? We're joining that group to support that human rights issue. They're not vegan yet, but I'm going to continue planting seeds wherever I can. And over the years, that then flourished. And then a lot of the people that I would have started working with and combining team efforts on certain human rights campaigns are now fully adopting vegetarianism, veganism, and wanting to help support our work. So it just takes time, and I think it's important never to give up on anyone, you know?
Right. But you must have a very strong heart, I would say, because sometimes, yeah, even though I know these people are on their way, I still would feel this kind of, I don't know, like awkwardness or feeling a bit unease when dealing with them, because sometimes they might have, speciesist wording, or every once for a while they would mention animals in a certain way that make me feel a bit like uncomfortable, etc. And especially like I work in the environmental humanities, working with scholars who talk about environmental impact and talking about environmental justice, but they are still meat eaters. And I just sometimes find it very difficult to, having respect. Actually, it's very hard.
It is. I guess I've been lucky that other organizations I've dealt with have always been respectful, and I've always refrained from talking about, what they're eating or buying or whatever in front of me. And if someone were to ask me, oh, would it bother you if I did X, Y, or Z? I would say, yes, it would. And then they don't, so I guess I've been lucky in that sense. But from the environmental aspect of things, environmental groups here have been probably the most combatant with us and the most defensive about not wanting to go vegan. So we don't really work with environmental groups very much because of that. And some of the environmental groups here would believe that it's okay to cull species for saving a tree and things like that. So there's a couple of organizations that were just like, no, we're not working with you or dealing with you. But in general, most organizations are willing to find common ground and not offend.
Well, this is actually mirroring what's going on in China, I think, as well. For the environmental groups in Ireland, are they not even promoting like plant-based food, or no?
No, not at all. No.
Oh my God, that really sucks. So they are conservationists, essentially,
yes,
I guess.
Essentially, yes. Yeah.
So it's like, I guess it's like an ecosystem way. And maybe they think they're a lions as well, or...
Yeah, I mean, they brand themselves as environmentalists, but really it's conservation. Really, it's a funny dynamic, and there's some organizations that are a little bit more open than others, but for the most part, they don't want anything to do with animal rights or even contemplating vegetarianism. Like, it's really weird, weird. And then you'll have like maybe an anti-racist organization ask us to give a presentation on veganism, so you would think maybe the environmental groups would be more on their way, or it'd be more connected, and they're the least connected to the situation.
And sometimes, like, this is, again, I think sometimes this argument applies to welfareists as well, or people who are working only on companion animals. At least in my experience, sometimes these people are the hardest to kind of convince, because they feel like they are already contributing a lot in, protecting biodiversity or doing whatnot. And it might make it even harder to challenge their fundamental ideology. But let's go back to what NARA has been doing. When did you help the fur farm to be abolished in Ireland? Could you tell us a little bit about that story?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's something that we have been campaigning on for a long time. I mean, the first time I organized a protest at a fur farm here, I was about 16, 17, something like that. So unfortunately, it took many years to achieve a ban, and there was a lot of bills proposed in the meantime. But our successful campaign started in about, I suppose, the end of 2017. It started, and then we had a full-blown campaign in 2018, and then 2019 is when it was approved in government to ban fur farming in Ireland. So it took us getting a video inside one of the fur farms. That video went quite viral. Then we were approached by the Socialist Party. A politician called Ruth Coppinger and her team contacted us and said that they've seen the video, it's terrible, and they want to work with us and put forward a bill to ban it. And so when we got that legislative step, we dedicated our time to just that campaign, just the fur farm campaign, and we traveled all around the country with it. By the end of the campaign, we distributed about 150,000 leaflets. And for a country with a population of 5 million, that's not bad going. We were in every county in Ireland, every major town and city. We did letterboxing, leaflet drops, info stalls. We protested the fur farms. We protested government buildings. We had a march in Dublin. And it got to the point that it was so popular and people were so on board with our campaigns that they were sending hundreds of emails to politicians every week. And the bill itself was about to go to a second stage vote. So how it works in Ireland is that bills are proposed and it's called first stage. Then second stage, all the politicians debate the bill and vote on it. So it was a day or two before the bill was supposed to be voted on that the government, the controlling government at the time, decided that they didn't need it to go to a vote, that they were going to ban fur farming and it was their idea all along. So, but that's the level of pressure that they were all receiving. And it all started with that one video. And then that had a ripple in a pond effect with everything else. But it took a multi-angled, multi-tactic approach to make it a win. If we hadn't gotten the video, then we wouldn't have had something viral to put out there. If we didn't get contacted by the Socialist Party and opposed a bill, it wouldn't have gotten a legislative platform, which then gave us a lot of public support. So like everything was snowballing in the right direction for us with this one. And that's the template we're now using going forward with everything else.
So investigation first, and then gradually building the momentum to putting financial pressure and also legislative pressure on the corporations. Right.
Absolutely.
I'm curious, like in Ireland, would there like a trend with fur, or like, is it part of the culture? Because you mentioned lots of like public support. So I guess it wasn't really something connected with cultural practices or tradition.
No,
right?
Not at all. I mean, by the time we had our successful campaign, there was only 3 mink farms left. And the majority of people in the country didn't even know we had fur farms because the 3 of them were in the middle of nowhere, very hidden, very hard to get to. And fur would not be very popular in general in Ireland. So it was very easy to convince people that, yes, it's wrong. We don't need it here. It's terrible. And when we were able to get that video and show people and put it out there, people were horrified that something like that existed here. So it was very much easy to get people on side, and even like shops and businesses were putting our flyers in their windows with sellotape, and they were taking stacks of leaflets to give to customers. Like, it got such widespread support. And at one point, a political party contacted me to say that they were getting 200 emails a week about this campaign, and could I make it stop? So that just shows you the level of support and the feeling and the anger and the upset that the general public were feeling about it. And, you know, if it wasn't for that, if it was just the handful of us emailing politicians, you know, the government would not have decided that they were just going to ban it themselves and it was their idea all along. I mean, you know, that's just, it was just quite an amusing finish to a very strong campaign. But I feel like it's the way to go. Once you get people aware visually, it makes a big difference. If I just tell someone, oh, there's a mink farm, it's very cruel, they're kept in little cages, it's terrible, they don't make the same connection as they would seeing it on a screen and having that visual and recognizing where it is and that it's here and we're doing this to animals in this country and they can help. So like, I think a format of visuals, then protests, leaflets, outreach, political, legislative steps is an essential combination, at least for Ireland anyway, in making proper legal change.
I definitely didn't imagine like the enthusiasm from the public, because if something like this happened in China, it would be becoming a discourse about class, social class again. Imagine you have this video came out and then people will say, well, I can never actually afford real fur anyway. You're supposed to broadcast this to these rich people, or, you know, like, I'm not part of the supply chain, or I'm not your target audience. Have you ever met Or was that not really an issue in Ireland at that time?
Not really an issue, but I would imagine it's because fur is not really that popular here. And by the time we had this campaign, we had basically gotten real fur out of the shops and clothing and fashion within Dublin. And so it wasn't really something people would see here that often. So it wasn't seen as a class issue. It was seen as a very much a blatant animal welfare, animal rights issue.
Right.
Luckily.
So, yeah, I guess the Irish rich people have better taste in fashion as well. Because I mean, a lot of these fur products, they're really tacky looking anyway, right? So
yeah, exactly. They don't even, apart from the ethics behind it,
exactly
ridiculous. Yeah.
So when you're doing investigation and also later on actually banning these farms, how did you deal with the farmers' transition and also, just like I guess a lot of the kind of negative side effects of your activism and campaigns?
Well, I suppose with the fur farm campaign, the politician we worked with, Ruth Coppinger, and the Socialist Party, their alternative was that if the farms were shut down, the farmers should be transitioned into another non-animal related industry. So their proposals were basically, let's fund re-education or retraining into something else that doesn't cause harm. Now, when the government took over, they just gave the farmers compensation. They just gave them money to shut down. So, the Socialist Party had a much more progressive, positive spin on actually creating a transition and a viable alternative rather than just throwing money at them. But what we're going to be doing with, say, our pig farm campaign, which is going to be a lot bigger and a lot more difficult, of course, is we're going to be drafting proposals to prove to farmers that they can actually transition and make more money. And we're making these proposals based on an amazing document and report published by James O'Donovan. It's called The Transition to a Vegan Agricultural System. It's an excellent document, and that's what we're using as a baseline to hopefully convince farmers there is a better way. Because for Ireland, there's about 240 to 250 pig farms here. With the fur farms, there was only 3 left. So it was easy to get rid of 3. We have maximum 250 here, which is still small comparatively to other countries. But if we just go full force, ban it all with no viable alternative, it's going to make things harder for us to achieve the goal, which is why we want to give a legitimate, practical, realistic alternative. And we're not just going to propose that to government officials, we're going to propose that to the Irish Farmers Association. So we want to be seen to be making a real solid effort into providing alternative, and hopefully that will get rid of any backlash that will accuse us of, making farmers homeless or no money for their children or whatever. So we're preempting that with this.
That's brilliant. And I also feel a bit envious because you actually have these researchers and also writers who are very much on board with helping this transition, right? Maybe you could tell us a little bit, for the listeners who are not familiar with the research or the scientists or writers in Ireland, could you tell us a bit more about their side of the story? How are they involved in your campaigns?
Absolutely. Well, look, this was actually something that James O'Donovan did independently. He has spent a long time researching this and putting reports together. And he published this great bit of work, and I found it just coincidentally. And then when I found it, I asked him if we could use it and print it. And he said, absolutely, of course. But it was, many years of research on his part. And that would be looking at how much Ireland exports, how much Ireland imports, looking at the size of Ireland, the types of land in Ireland, the types of soil, what could be used where and for what, and what could be grown instead. So an awful lot of work went into it. And he also looked at what grants are given to farmers here in Ireland and from the EU. And he basically proved that farming wouldn't exist as we know it if it wasn't for grants. So if they're not being self-sustainable with what they have and they need support from the government or from the EU, it's not working anyway. But his alternative proposals and soil use and crop use and it would actually make them independently financially stable. And this is in a 96-page report. He does Zoom presentations, and I'm sure he's a very nice guy. He's very intelligent. I'm sure he would be willing to help other countries figure out how they could compile the data he compiled in Ireland.
He can certainly, I think, inspire a lot of other, researchers or writers who have similar skills and similar ideology, and
absolutely.
Put up with, plans in terms of transition. Because sometimes I also feel very burdened whenever I, do advocacy. Even I'm just, typing on keyboard. I always feel a bit like not having enough knowledge, not having enough resources on giving people the solution. And for each industry and also for different regions, there will be context dependent plans and transition, strategies. So to have researchers like that is such a boon.
Oh, definitely. His website is naturerising.ie. So you can contact him there. You can download the report there. And because I know him, I know he would be happy to help anybody.
Lovely, lovely. So you have mentioned the pig industry. You are working on a very, I would say, very successful campaign already in further regulating, putting economic pressure on the industry. And it seemed to me like it's a strategy of achieving abolitionism even though it's through like a welfare legislation. So I hope you're not bothered by repeating what you have said maybe like 100 times in our interviews and conferences, because a lot of us in China, we don't have access to YouTube. So unfortunately, I guess one of the major resources they can get in terms of the story will be from our podcast. So at what point that you started to do this investigation, and also just how hard it is at the beginning, could you tell us a bit about how this campaign started and how is it now?
Absolutely. I'd be happy to, always happy to share information and share what's going on. So we had not really properly tackled animal agriculture here in our campaigns before. Sure, we've done vegan outreach and things like that, like hundreds of times, but any information or even visuals we have would have been images we have gotten from, say, the UK or the US. And we figured if we were going to do a proper campaign on animal agriculture, we needed our own visuals. Then we looked at, okay, what is the species we want to focus on first? And we were looking at what are the smallest amount of farms per species, per industry. And the smallest amount is the pig industry. They're the smallest farming group in the country. So we thought it would be good to start with them because it's smaller numbers, and also because it's so intensive and it's factory farmed. And in Ireland, you would never see a pig outdoors. So we decided to start with them. We did our research and we investigated farms. We were able to put the footage into videos, and then the videos, we did an investigation about 2 years ago. Our first video was only like maybe an under a 4-minute clip, an amalgamation of the footage we took. That went very well as an introduction, but we found that the responses that we were getting via our allies, ally politicians, was that the government was saying that they're investigating, and it's probably isolated incidents. We wanted to show that the horrors that we witnessed were widespread. So then we went back to the drawing board. We did more investigations. We put together a longer video, and that really hammered home the fact that this is the industry. Like, it's not just one or two cruel farms. They're all horrific. Now, obviously, as a vegan animal rights group, it's not the welfare and the cruelty, that we only base things on. It's the concept of consent and use of animals in general. But this video that we put together, the second one, went really viral, and we broke down the main video into little clips. And so far within Ireland, it's gotten 500,000 views within Ireland in various videos on various of our social media platforms. So it's gotten out there really widely, and we're finding very little opposition to it. So we do leaflet drops around the country. Since about March of this year, we've been consistently out a couple of times a week doing leaflet drops and outreach. And to date, we've distributed about 50,000 leaflets just between March and now. So it's going really well. And we're getting a lot of support in terms of people are donating when they get our leaflets through their door. People are following us on social media. They're wanting to help. They're wanting us to send them leaflets so they can do outreach in their own areas. So it's even more positive than our fur campaign, which is kind of strange to me. But because of the video, again, we have two politicians, Paul Murphy and Ruth Coppinger again, who both of which brought forward the fur bill. They have put forward legislation in our Dáil, which is our parliament, on pig industry. Now, on face value, it does look welfarist. So the bill asks for banning sow stalls, farrowing crates, mutilations, and this sounds very basic and very minimum. But for Ireland anyway, if you even just abolish just the sow stalls, it would make the industry economically unviable to continue. Because what they have crammed into one farm with all these rows and rows of stalls, if they had to get rid of all that and give the pigs their own space and their own pens, their own outdoor areas, it wouldn't be financially viable for them to continue this industry. So even though it is welfarist, in terms of face value, it's very abolitionist if it was even part of it was to get through. So we are looking at this as phase one, a first step towards the obliteration of the industry. And because it is such a face value welfarist bill, we kind of feel, what is the government going to say? They don't want farmers to give them more space? Like, who can say no to that, Now, they probably will vote against it, but I think the public are going to be like, wait, this bill is only asking about being kinder and giving them more room. And, so I think no matter what happens, it's going to be a win-win for the campaign, and it's going to further things in some way. And so far as well, we are not getting any opposition from the Irish Farmers Association. Radio stations, TV and everything have asked them to come on and defend what we put out there. They've asked them to do live radio debates with me. So far, in the space of nearly 2 years, they have said no to everything. So not even the Irish Farmers Association, who is there to represent all farmers in Ireland, not even they are willing to defend pig farmers. So it's very interesting, and it's going quite well. We have councils around the country as well that will be proposing motions on supporting the bill. So we're getting more, I suppose, political support for this than we did on the fur farming campaign. And in the general public, they are not arguing with us at all, which is weird because our leaflets are basically saying, ban pig farming, go vegan, we can help you with this. And when we're handing these out, no one is trying to fight us on it. It's kind of strange, but we're running with it. It's working.
This is almost too good to believe.
Yeah, I'm waiting for something bad to happen. I feel like the pig industry were maybe secretly plotting to sue us all or something like that. I don't know, but for so far, everything is going surprisingly well.
Right. And sometimes maybe you were over preparing. Maybe at the beginning, we all feel a bit like paranoid in terms of what it could happen. But actually, once we take the action, it became so much easier than we have imagined. Maybe at the local level, they are not that important to local economy. Maybe there are other compounding effects. Who knows?
Definitely. I mean, the industry is in decline in general, and I wish that was down to us. It's not, it's declining anyway. And they do rely on EU grants and government grants to remain operating, because most of the pig farms in Ireland would be smaller farms. Now, there are like a handful of major industrial corporate farms, but the majority would be small and they can't survive without grants. So we see this campaign as just giving the industry a kick out the door, to be honest.
Yeah, so correct me if I'm wrong. So these were the farmers that you have mentioned, they were transitioning into growing strawberries, or were they the other farmers?
That was actually an idea put forward by when we had our fur farm campaign. So Ruth Coppinger found out that when Scotland over in the UK banned fur farming, some of the fur farmers used the fur sheds to grow strawberries. And they actually apparently made more money growing strawberries than they did killing mink. So when Ruth was doing radio debates and putting forward potential ideas, she brought this up as a possible alternative. And, you know, to me, that was like a great idea, like plant agriculture instead of fur farming. Fantastic. So that's what happened here. Now, as far as I'm aware, none of the fur farmers did that here. They just got rid of the sheds. They took them all down. But I just thought that was a very unique and positive spin on ending fur farming, growing strawberries.
Right. So when it comes to the pig farms, when you were getting wider support, either from the public or from the politicians, Did you frame it purely about animal rights, or do you also connect with public health, environmental issues, workers' rights, etc.?
Our main point would be just on animal rights, and the idea that, you can't use an animal against their will anyway. Even if you were to give each pig their own acre of grass and fields, whatever, it's still not right. But we do mention some health aspects, environmental aspects, and workers' rights aspects as well. So on our leaflet at the moment, like the front page is ban pig farming, this is terrible, there's a bill, and then the back has some statistics on pollution and things like that. So we try and use every approach because different things are going to connect with different people, but we want the moral baseline at the forefront.
In terms of having this seemingly welfarism approach to an abolition ends, I think the term for these kind of regulation or bill is called a backdoor ban, right?
Yes, yeah.
So I just wonder if you could give us a very general idea about how can we as activists make sure these welfare-based victories are actually stepping stones towards full abolition rather than becoming like a permanent reformed status quo?
I think the important thing is that if you make little welfare improvements or achievements, that you don't just leave it at that. Like with the bill, I've always said publicly and privately that it's not good enough in terms of what we want. And even like the wonderful politicians that we work with, they know that this is not enough, that this is, I'm going to want more, we're going to want more, the campaign wants more. But like, even if like I do very much see that if this bill was a success, it would be a backdoor ban bill. But even if they decided, okay, we're just going to take one thing and we'll remove sow stalls, all right, that's going to maybe shut down maybe half the pig farms, but half of them might continue or regenerate. I still think that, okay, that's a step in the right direction, but it will only intensify our campaign. So if they're already slightly weakened, we're already going to be in a better, higher opportunity to give them that further kick out the door. And if we have the public on board with certain things, then I think it's going to be easier to push them to different things. And I can see that in a sort of an arc over the last 20 years in Ireland, people not overly caring about these things, to there being like massive support for, say, rescuing dogs and cats and horses and wildlife, to then people then thinking about veganism. And we're one of the countries in Europe apparently that has the highest amount of vegans per population, which is, crazy really when you think that Ireland is predominantly animal agriculture as a country and culturally. But yeah, that's a long-winded answer to your question. But I think that the point is not to relax on the little wins, just keep pushing. Because if you have like one leg of that chair hacked off, keep hacking the rest off till the chair is gone,
A follow-up question, when it comes to keep on pushing these industry, what if they relocate to places where there's less regulations? How would you respond to these kind of, I know it's a very common question, but how would you usually come back to these questions?
Yes, we faced that with our fur campaign, actually. Some people, even within the vegan community, would not support the campaign because they said it's not vegan enough, or the fur farmers are all going to leave and they're going to set up fur farms in another country and whatever. That didn't happen. And, my answer to that is, even if that's the case, globally, there's us in Ireland are not the only animal rights activists in the world. If some farmer was to relocate and open up a fur farm or a pig farm or whatever in another country, I'm sure activists there will handle it. And even collectively within Europe, fur is very much on the decline. And I think, that saying, think globally, act locally. If you can get rid of something horrific in your own country, you're not going to not want to support another country's efforts. Like if we made Ireland a vegan utopia anytime soon, I'm not going to give up on activism and just be like, oh, that's me done, Ireland is finished. If another country needed support or help, I would absolutely jump ship over to another country and help them if they wanted it or if they needed it. So I think it's important that when you're doing activism, to think collectively so that you are not just shifting problems to each other, and that's why with, say, the pig campaign, I would love it if other countries were to get on board and do their own pig farm campaigns. Like the UK has had their own long before us. So pig farmers are not going to jump to the UK from Ireland because it's already being tackled over there. So if they wanted to relocate, they'd have to go even further, which they're unlikely to do. But that's because the UK has such a strong campaign against pig farming. They have so many investigations, so many groups working on it. I don't think a pig farmer would think that that's a good idea, you know?
Yeah, and even with regards to relocation, it takes a lot of time and efforts for the company,
Absolutely.
for the corporations too. So for them, it might just not be worth it. I'm trying to be a bit more mindful about the time, but before we end, I want to quickly maybe get some idea about, as an organization, how NARA, as a non-hierarchical organization, how would you structure, how do you make sure the structure could work? And also as an organization who's having a very strong attitude about anti-oppression, intersectionality, anti-fascism, racism, sexism, etc., how do you make sure these ideologies or practices are being actually applied in your organization? How would you avoid compassion fatigue and burnout?
Well, I think like for ourselves, we've all been working together for many years, and we would have very little disagreements or differences of opinions. And if we do, everything is resolved in a calm manner, because at this point, we're more than just colleagues. We all actually like each other and we're friends, so that does make a big difference. But from the beginning, I always made sure that anyone new wanting to join us understood what we stood for, and understood that any type of racism or homophobia or whatever would not be tolerated. And, there's a difference between people maybe not being aware and needing to be sort of called in or called out and educated on something. But if they were fundamentally not aligned with us, then they're out. And that's how we've been since day one. But I'm fortunate enough that we don't have conflict, and a non-hierarchical approach for us just keeps everything very fair and very even. And no one wants to be a boss or a leader. And whenever we have a new project coming up, we talk about it together. And some people might have more time to dedicate to one campaign than another, but we're not dictating things to each other. We're not giving each other workloads. Everything is quite balanced. And I don't know if that's just, we're very lucky and unique for us, but we don't really have conflict with each other. We're very uplifting towards each other. And even little things, like if I feel that I've done an interview that maybe I could have done better on, everyone is just there with compliments, and not making me feel bad about anything. And the same if there's an interaction at a protest that maybe went a bit negatively with a member of the public, and people are thinking, oh, I should have said this or I could have done that. None of us give out to each other or criticize each other when we're all doing our best. And I think that's really important too, because I know sometimes in some maybe corporate animal rights groups or paid corporate animal rights groups, if something is not done a certain way that the leader wants it done or the boss wants it done, it is like a job dynamic where you're going to be in trouble. Whereas with us, it's grassroots, it's voluntary, we're all doing our best, we learn from each other, we support each other. And for us, non-hierarchical and consistently anti-oppression keeps us all very much in a very much a comrade space. We all genuinely like each other and think what each other do is fantastic.
What about strategic decisions or making trade-offs? What if some members think that we need to spend most of our time and investment or financial resources on pressure campaign, but there might be some other members who are like, oh, we really need to spend more time on education. Our education is not there yet. When it comes to these kind of decision-making processes, do you also find it very smooth for you guys?
Yeah, it's very smooth. There would be some of us that might be more passionate about certain campaigns, but we split the workload. So for example, if I'm working primarily on the pig issue at the moment, and someone else thinks we should be working on a blood sports or fox hunting campaign, they'll take that on. And, a recent example, was one of the team is fundraising at the moment just to fund our fox hunting campaign, because that's what she feels we should be working on primarily at the moment. Not as in like one campaign's more important than the other, but because seasonally fox hunting is supposed to start now, she's like, right, I'm going to work fundraising on this. I'm going to get these leaflets. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. And that means I know she's taking care of it, and I can focus on pigs for the moment, so it's not conflicting uses of time or of money. People just do what they feel they're most passionate about. And we would have an overlapping campaign with Support Animal Free Research Ireland. They're working on a Botox campaign. We support that Botox campaign, but they're doing all the work with that. We're just in the background, and it runs smoothly. I don't know if we're lucky or what, but like, people just take on roles and it works.
Yeah, it sounds amazing because it just feels like you guys are really lucky and just really nice people. Maybe that's also the charm of being a grassroots organization, and also like-minded people tend to gather together. Do you have any final remark for our listeners, and also for people who are interested in your work? Where can they follow NARA's latest updates?
Well, we're on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and our website is naracampaigns.org. So anyone who wants to check out our work can do so there. And what I just really leave people with is that, if you have a passion about something and you want to make change, it doesn't matter if it's just you or you have 1,000 people behind you, you can do it. In Ireland, we're a very small country. Our core team and our group is about 10 people. And we're still achieving a lot considering we're so small. So for me, I don't think anything is impossible. I think you just need to believe in yourself, believe in your work, and believe that you'll see the change and it will happen. So just do it. Even if it's just you by yourself, just do it because it works.
Yeah, because I think, Laura, you had that experience just being by yourself, and then just started with a very small group of people and achieved really amazing stuff. So thank you so much, Laura. It was such a great experience talking to you.
Oh, it's great to be on the show. Thank you for having me.